Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to City Lights Live, the online edition of the City Lights events calendar. I'm your host, Peter Maravellis, and tonight we're delighted to have back in the house Caro De Robertis celebrating the publication of their new book. It's titled So Many Stars, An Oral History of Trans, Non-Binary, Genderqueer, and Two-Spirit People of Color. And it's published by our friends over at Algonquin Books. As always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush people. It is always an honor and a privilege to do so. With so many stars, Caro weaves together the voices of trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and two-spirit elders of color as they share authentic and intimate accounts of how they have created space for themselves and their communities in the world. It is a deeply personal and moving oral history of a generation of trans and gender nonconforming elders of color, from leading activists to artists to ordinary citizens, who discuss their own courageous stories and cultural innovations and acts of resistance. So Many Stars is a singular work that helps preserve the words of trans people of wisdom for future generations who can more fully exist in the world today because of these very trailblazers. Caro De Robertis is the author of 6 novels, including The Palace of Eros, Cantoras, and more. Their books have been translated into 17 languages and have received numerous honors, including 2 Stonewall Book Awards, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, and much more. Caro is actually the first openly non-binary writer to receive the Dos Passos Prize. And Caro is also an award-winning literary translator and a professor at San Francisco State University. They make their home in Oakland, California with their 2 children. And joining him today is none other than Julián Delgado Lopera, who is the author of the New York Times acclaimed novel Fibre Tropical from Feminist Press, another wonderful, wonderful indie press, the winner of the 2021 Ferro Grumbley Award and a Lambda Literary Award. Julián is also the author of the Lambda Literary Award-winning book Cuentamelo, an illustrated bilingual collection of oral histories by LGBTQ Latinx immigrants. His work has appeared in Granta, the Kenyon Review, McSweeney's, just to name a few. He is the former executive director of Radar Productions and one of the founders of Drag Queen Story Hour. Woohoo! Julián has been curating Latinx history projects for over 10 years in partnerships with places such as the LGBT Historical Society, the San Francisco Public Library, amongst others. His second novel is forthcoming from Liverite Books, and Julián resides in Brooklyn. Please join us now in offering a warm welcome to Caro De Robertis in conversation with Julián Delgado Lopera. It is such a pleasure to have you both with us. Welcome to City Lights.
Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful welcoming space. I'm so happy to be here. Caro, such a joy to see you.
Juli, un encanto. So wonderful to see you here. And thank you, Peter, for those incredibly beautiful, generous introductions and all of the warmth of welcome at City Lights, which is such a fantastic bookstore. I hope we can all support them. And thank you to everybody who's here and showing up and joining us here in the Zoom. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Hi, Juli,
Yeah.
over in Brooklyn.
Hola, over in Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm just so happy to be talking to you about your book. I have read it by now probably 3 times. I know everybody's also very excited to get to it. I think, yeah, I'm just like so moved. There's so many things that I want to talk to you about. But first, I wanted to start the conversation before you read a little bit from the book. I wanted to just ask you, as I was thinking about how to start this, I just like, the book has been out for a little bit now, and I just wanted to know how your heart is.
Mm.
Things can feel very heavy right now, and I think I'm just, today as I was thinking about what to ask you first, I was like, it would be nice to just remember that we're like human beings, and like, I just want to know how your heart is right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Juli. And also just thank you for taking the time to do this with me. It's such an honor. For those of you listening who have not yet read Juli's incredible novel, Fiebre Tropical, read it. It's amazing. It's glorious. And I cannot wait for their book that comes out next year, Pretend You're Dead and I Carry You,
Yeah.
which I got to read an early version of. It's changed, right?
Right.
It's changed some, but
Very much.
so good. And I really truly cannot wait. It's like a bright spark of light in my 2026 is looking forward to your book. And we need those bright, we need those beacons of light in these times, in these stormy times, which brings me back to your amazing question about the heart. My heart is well overall, considering the circumstances. My heart is nourished. I'm trying to be very intentional about keying in to pockets of joy and sources of joy and soul nourishment and defiant joy. I've been thinking a lot about how queer and trans joy is a form of defiance and a form of sustenance, and sort of always has been throughout our collective history, which doesn't mean it's always easy. We have to process grief along the way, and fear and uncertainty, and with all of the things that are happening around us right now societally. So I think my heart's a bit pummeled by the storms, like many of us might feel as well. Pero aquí, in Spanish, people ask you, how are you? One answer is aquí, 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 aquí.
Yeah.
I'm here. And that feels like a triumph. How's your heart, Juli?
Thank you so much for that. And I feel like that's like, I appreciate you like opening up and being vulnerable. And I think it's also part of being connected to this book precisely is the vulnerability of the work and the opening up with other trans people and then being able to just like kind of acknowledge each other's humanity. And I think that that's what the book is also just constantly doing. So I appreciate you saying that. And I feel similarly. I feel like I feel nourished. I feel very loved. I feel cared for in the middle of just a lot of grief and anger and frustration. But I was sharing with you something sweet that happened today, which is I have to take a photo for my book for the book that's coming out next year. And so one of my closest friends, who's a photographer, who's a trans woman, and I were taking photos in the middle of the street in Brooklyn. And I was just like, oh my God, we're like doing queer history. Like this is the stuff that people are talking about in So Many Stars. This is the things that we're doing right now, so that in 20 years, I'm going to be telling the story about how like me and like one of my girlfriends are like out on the streets taking photographs as people are just like walking by, and I'm like taking off my shirt, like putting another shirt on, and just like, and it's like very, and she's like Venezuelan. And so it's like, and it was like so much joy. And I'm like, oh, these are the moments that I definitely need in my life, like this like level of connection. And particularly right now, also with like other trans people and other trans people of color. Like it just feels so intimate and beautiful. So anyway, so similarly, things are complicated. And I also feel like I'm very much leaning into joy and nourishment as much as I can.
Right. And that story really encapsulates, if I may say, this way in which we are all the elders of the future. You're younger than me, you've got further to go, but we are all the elders of the future and the ancestors of the future. And I feel like in this book, that's one of the things I was so blown away by with the 20 elders that I interviewed for this book, is how conscious they were in their dailiness and in their thinking about possibility and about their path, that they are going to be an ancestor one day, and what do they have to say, and what is the legacy that they leave, and that the dailiness, those daily moments of victory and sometimes very hard won spaciousness are important, and they are living. We are living history right now.
Exactly. So do you want to read a little bit from it so we can get into it?
Yes, absolutely. So Many Stars is a collection of voices that I had the incredibly good fortune to gather from an oral history project that I was part of with a Baldwin Emerson Fellowship. And so all of the elders are trans, non-binary, genderqueer, or two-spirit people of color. And when I was gathering them into a book, I wove them into thematic chapters. So rather than being a chapter of each person's life story, the chapters begin with Glimmers in Childhood, which is a chapter about, discovering your own or feeling or knowing your own true gender as a child, and then moving through sort of a narrative arc of growing up and coming out, contributions to society, reflecting on change and aging and looking towards the future. So I'm going to read just a tiny little bit from the last chapter, because speaking of How's Your Heart, honestly, one of the things I've been doing to sustain myself through the wildness of the last 6 months is going back to this chapter and rereading people's voices and taking strength from them myself. So even though I was there when they first said them. So here's just a few little pieces from the last chapter, Visions for the Future. Adela Vasquez. The future is bright if we want it to be. Storm Miguel Flores. I have hope. I feel like people are really pushing to uplift trans people, and also to look at the ways that they're not being inclusive, who's in power, who's not in power, which I'm so happy about. Nikki Calma. We're everywhere. Joan Benoit. All the right-wing stuff that's happening throughout the world, it's happening in a bunch of countries. I think that's their last hurrah. They're hanging on to that last little straw that they've got. They know they're going. They know they're a dying breed. That's why they're being as charged and violent as they are. Adela Vasquez. Look at where we're at. You think the queers at large are going to allow people to come and oppress them again? No, child. There's going to be somebody who's going to say, fuck that, fuck off, get off my dress. I don't want you to oppress me. It happened before, back in the 70s. We were pioneers in many ways. We learned how to fight AIDS. That was very important. And we didn't know half of what we know now. Bambi Salcedo. My hope is that you understand that you do have power, and not just individual power, but also collective power. We need to be able to exercise our power. We need to be able to change the structures that have marginalized us for many, many years. I believe that could happen. Even if I don't get to see it, I believe it will happen. My hope is what keeps me alive. Fresh Lev White. That's the vision. Human liberation. Joan Benoit. Safety for everyone. C. Njobe Dugas. Just freaking stay free. Tina Valentin Aguirre. Fuck shit up. Fuck shit up. Do something that fucks everything up and then make something grand. Donna Persona. Do magnificent things. Tina Valentin Aguirre. I think we have an obligation. I have an obligation to put something that's wondrous into the world. It doesn't matter that it's short term. I need to be a part of bringing this magic alive. So can you. Nelson Dalerta Perez. There is space for everybody in this world. Fight for it. It's right there. All you have to do is claim it.
Oh, that's so good. I hope we can hear everybody clapping in the background. We can all hear you guys. I know you're clapping. It's so beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking as you're reading and just so much around the ideas of freedom that are circulating in the book. That was just coming to me as you were reading that, and how much there was of like yanking freedom for themselves, like literally just kind of like that is part of a trans lineage is that you just do it yourself and you kind of make that freedom happen. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's remarkable here is that although there are 20 completely different trajectories, people grew up all over the country and in other countries as well. So Nikki Calma, who we just heard saying we're everywhere, grew up in the Philippines. Bambi Salcedo grew up in Mexico. There's people who grew up in Cuba and Argentina, and then migrated to the United States for different reasons, and some of them to be more free and live their whole trans lives. But with all of these very different experiences, and with Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian folks in the book, you know, and all of these different life circumstances and backgrounds, one thing that they all had in common is that with people being 50, in their 50s, 60s, or 70s upon interview over the last few years, every single person in some way grew up without adequate mirrors for all of who they were, without the big, beautiful, proliferating LGBTQ plus lexicon we have today. And so they had to be incredibly creative. They had to create themselves. You know, Crystal Mason in the book says so powerfully, you know, I create myself, and if I'm lucky, I will keep creating myself until the day I die. That there's this sort of act of, you know, self of invention that can be part of self-actualization, that's enormously courageous and enormously powerful. And it can happen in small moments of dailiness. And it can happen in moments of, you know, collective movement that result in social change and everything in between. And so, you know, it was just very powerful for me to sit in front of people in their living rooms, kitchens, offices, and, you know, with the microphones and the headphones on, and just hear these stories that in some ways were deeply, deeply personal, and yet at the same time were stories of trans and gender nonconforming becoming, trans and gender queer culture making and meaning making that was at once personal and, you know, very much political, and helped make us possible.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
you know, because I know you know some of the elders in this book.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So my trans mom is in there. One of my aunts is in there. And
we ended with your trans aunt at the end, and the chapter opens with your trans mother. May she rest in.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, the beat. Yeah, so like with the as you're talking about, I want to just really get into the process because I feel that you know, you're talking about like sitting down and like eating with them and like and there is so much intimacy in also the process of gathering a book like this. So I want to just know a little bit of how was the process with people and with like editing. I just remember even like when I've done this that there's so much drinking of coffee and eating of pastelitos and like listening to stories over and over again and
Yeah.
kind of going circular many times. And I feel like it's just really about being able to build relationships also with folks and like um yeah, I want to know just a little bit about how the process was of like the gathering of a lot of the stories for you.
Yeah, you know, you have to eat the pastelitos. And you know, that's part of like meeting people in their context and their and their culture. You know, and every interview was different. Every person's sort of home and cultural context is different. Some people are, you know, just ready to get to the mic. You know, Bambi Salcedo, for example, is the founder and executive director of the Trans Latina Coalition. She's, you know, incredibly busy. She was like, I have this 2 hour slot for you, no more, no less. And I felt really lucky, you know, to have that time. I'll take it, you know. So there wasn't going to be a long linger. At the same time, in those 2 hours, she spent the first chunk of it introducing me to every single trans Latina working in that office. And you know, I couldn't sit down and set up my mics until that had occurred. So even that was a form of deep hospitality.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
And culture making too, you know, I feel like that is part of like culture making of like having to like acknowledge every person in the room. I just feel like it's a
yes,
very Latin American thing where
very
you are
Latin
not just gonna
American.
like sit there. You have to go and say hi to everybody in the family.
Hay que saludar, and you
And
know, the
yeah,
besitos.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you know, we're kissing each other's cheeks, you know.
Yeah,
And so I mean, and that's something muy humano, you know, and very, very human. And I, you know, it's absolutely Latino culture. And then there's also, you know, with transness and with queerness, you know, we are the great innovators of chosen family. You know, there were so many stories about making and weaving chosen family that people poured out in these interviews that I had to create a whole chapter about it. And so I think that's part of it too, is like we're already family. You know, there's a story that Joby Dugas talks about going to their campus for the first time when they're going back to college, and these queer people come up to her, these queer people of color, and are like, "Are you coming with us?" And then they were family. They were ride or die now, and that was it. They were family, and they still are years later. There's so many different kinds of stories. But Adela Vasquez, your trans mother, who you actually connected me to for this book, thank you. I opened the interview with this. I opened the introduction with a story about how when I came to that interview, she had baked a cake from scratch for the event. She had stayed up late to do it, and she'd made these little sandwichitos, little finger sandwiches with the crust cut off too, and they were on nice china, and she made tea. And I had to sit down and feast before before we were gonna get on the record. And again, it's just something, it was something deeply moving. And I have such deep love for all of the people who so generously shared their voices and stories with me.
Yeah. And it makes me think of how, while you're talking specifically about Adela, but also like with Bambi, like the care, like even if she didn't have enough time, I think that there's this way in which the way that trans stories get consumed by the media, it's so incredibly transactional and diluted. Even sometimes when it's coming from like our community, sometimes because we have to just make a point, it's like, this is what it is, this is the identity thing that we need to get across. And so I think that part of the beauty of this book is like the extension in which everybody gets to render their humanity so expansively, right? And I feel that with the pastelitos and stuff like that, to me, it's also just about like the love and care of her own story, and like wanting someone to listen so much, because I feel that folks really want trans stories, but it's like the actual like sitting down and taking the time to spend time with your elders and like listen to them and like eat all their food, and just like, so I feel like it's both the actual process of like the sitting down and spending so much time, and also like the just beautiful rendering of the expansiveness of our humanity in the book, that it was just like so incredibly moving to me.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to hear, because it meant so much to me. I was so daunted by the project, and I so deeply wanted to do justice to people's voices and stories and really pay tribute to them through the book. So, as a writer, one can only do one's best and know that that's the intention. But a way that that's really important, I think, is that one of the issues that we have in our society in terms of transphobia is that we have this mainstream idea that transness, genderqueerness is an invention of the young, and that it's a sort of fad that therefore can be easily dismissed, or that it's something that people are telling young people to do, but doesn't really exist or didn't really exist before. And we see that fueling a lot of the hostile legislation that has ramped up so alarmingly this year, and has been ramping up for some time. And nothing could be further from the truth. And so I think it's really incredibly important to really raise up that, our trans elders have always been here. Of course, we've always been here. Gender variance, transness has always been part of the fabric of every culture, every community, every era in history, all over the world, and has simply not always been able to be part of the archive, the official archive, right? The stories haven't gotten passed down. They haven't been made visible. They've been systemically erased. But, trans, genderqueer, and non-binary elders of color are right here among us, with plenty to say. And I think it's an important refutation, also for younger trans and genderqueer generations to know that they have a lineage, that we have a lineage, that we're part of much.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, because I was going to ask you about like why it was so important to have a trans lineage specifically for trans people of color.
I think when we talk about the element that's about people of color, we have another layer of erasure and invisibility too, right? So if mainstream attention on trans and non-binary folks is often skewed towards younger folks, it is also skewed in a way that targets them, you know. It's also often, representation is often white. And so we don't get to hear those stories nearly enough of the intersections, like the intersection of Blackness and trans femininity and trans masculinity. You know, just as an example, you know, Sharon Grayson in the book, who is a Black trans woman who transitioned in the 60s and is, you know, a major iconic AIDS rights and trans rights activist. You know, she talks about, you know, her relationship to Black womanhood in particular, and like what that means to her, to be a Black woman, and also to have conversations with cis straight Black women about, you know, I love you and have so much respect for your femininity and would want you to see me. And then, you know, the transmasculine folks in the book, just as an example, Fresh Leb White talks about, you know, transitioning and having a white trans man come up to him one day and say, you know, isn't the privilege amazing? Like the male privilege. And, you know, he says, if you mean by privilege, you mean, you know, being more likely to get pulled over and shot by cops. I'm not feeling that, actually. So I've transitioned to being a Black man, and that experience is not always made visible. The complexity, the layers of that, you know, as well as when he was a drag king and he saw that, you know, some of the white drag kings were really mocking the masculine archetypes that they were playing. And he was like, well, I'm not about getting on that stage and mocking Black masculinity. You know, it's something different and layered. And will there be space for me and my Blackness with masculinity together? There should be, there must be. So we need all these conversations, you know, we need all these layers. And that's part of the joy too of creating a book that has 20 voices is, you know, no one story can ever be fully representative of anything. No single trans person can represent all of transness, you know. And so my hope was that in, you know, although this is in no way definitive either, it's just 20 people. Nevertheless, by juxtaposing people's stories, you know, I hoped to create some contrast, some range of possibility.
Yeah, and I think that range of possibility is definitely there. And I feel like, you know, as someone who's like so passionately in love with like queer history and like trans history, I feel like it does give us a sense of possibility and of being to like know our own histories. Um, you know, pushing like even pushing the ideas that the very like fucked up ideas about our own history that are getting pushed by the right wing, I think is just like this sense of like a connection that ancestry gives you, right? Like the sense that you are connected to this wonderful lineage, and I see it also in a very like spiritual way, which a lot of the folks here also kind of talk about their own spirituality with transness, especially like the two spirit folks.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, like even Nelson, who I think talks a little bit about Santeria, is just like there is all this way in which having a sense of ancestry just like really builds a sense of spirituality and connection that's beyond what we know right here. And it also, I think, just creates a sense of like possibility. Especially, I think, with what's going on, I think it also manages to create spaces for hope. You know, like even when I'm reading a lot of the stuff and like knowing the history of some of these people, you know, we're talking about folks who came from the Philippines and from Cuba. And, you know, I was thinking about like my mom and my aunt who came from Cuba and the things that they had to go through to just like arrive into the United States.
Right.
And yeah, go ahead.
Right. I mean, we keep using the word unprecedented to talk about what we're going through in the United States right now. And in some ways, absolutely, in the history of, you know, in the history of the United States, many things are happening that are unprecedented. But the need to live courageously and stand in our autonomy and truth and keep our sights on the world and future we want to have and the lives that we deserve and the dignity that we deserve, the need to do that in the face of forces that are bent on our erasure, that is precedented, right? And these generations, like you mentioned, Nelson in Cuba, you know, I mean, those stories are so moving to me about the drag shows, you know, that she put on at great risk to herself. It was illegal in Havana. She was arrested and tortured many times by the police, for doing drag shows and, you know, creating spaces of refuge for queerness. And she doesn't regret it at all. And made a tremendous difference. So, you know, we have these deep root stories. And then, you know, even here in the United States, we have stories in there about the AIDS crisis. And, you know, wow, you know, the government does not care whether we live or die, and people are dying, and we are not safe, and we are rallying toward each other, and we are choosing love and dignity. So, um, to me, the stories that you know that are in this book bring so much powerful reminder, you know, that we do have a legacy and a lineage, like a trove of wisdom for how to live courageously, through really difficult times, and through the reality of living among institutional forces, whether it's authoritarianism, white supremacy, patriarchy, that don't want us to exist. That's not new. And the living, getting to live moments of beauty and defiant joy in the context of those horrors, that is also not new. And you know, one of the most meaningful things that somebody said to me in this book tour was actually a straight cis person who said, "Well, I'm getting a lot out of this book about how to live, because I want to live authentically, and I want to live with love and joy and transcend my fear." And these folks know so much about that, you know, because of how they've lived, and what they've had to do to create their lives. And I thought that that was a, you know, really beautiful too. Like, this is for all of us in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we do so much for cis people. I'm like, you're welcome constantly, you know? Like,
Contribution.
seriously.
It's a contribution, right? Like, yes, I would like to see it as a contribution to culture, for trans and gender nonconforming folks, and for LGBTQ plus folks, and also for everyone.
Yeah, we're constantly doing that. I always say that trans men are doing so much work for masculinity and manhood. And I'm always just like, cis men should be thanking us all the time
Yes,
for everything that we're doing. And we're trying so hard, you guys. To like, you know,
we are expanding and giving so much to masculinity.
yeah,
Yes,
I know.
by being part of it and contributing to it. And that's a beautiful thing. And that culture making and that joyful culture making continues even here.
Yeah. And I feel like we inherit all of this as our inheritance, and it's ours, and it's like our right. And I feel like the way that sometimes we understand inheritance culturally is so much around bloodlines,
Yeah.
right? And it's so much about like being in connection to someone where you share blood. But I feel like that's why it's been, and for me, you know, for a lot of us who have complicated relationships with birth family, it
Yes.
becomes a real sense of rudeness to know and to be tapped into the trans culture and trans history, you know. And I feel like that's why it's so important, the culture making part, and all the ways in which everybody in here, like the creation of community and yeah, and spaces to come together, because that's how you tap into that lineage, right? Like the way to tap into trans lineage is definitely by being in the culture and like being with other trans people, where you like learn a lot of things, right? It's like also the equivalent of just going to the gay bar and like just knowing how to be gay. Like, how else are you gonna know, you know? And so I just like, well, the queer bar makes a big appearance in here. But I'm just saying that there's something that is different about how we understand inheritance and an ancestry that is not the usual way of like bloodline, but it is very different because it has so much to do about like coming together and tapping into it there. And it's a choice that you're constantly making too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's incredibly important. And, you know, something that the stories in this book really speak to. And I think our lived experiences, you know, Juli, that, you know, we're talking about, like, our lived experiences are that too. I mean, as a person myself who does come from familial homophobia, And, I've been estranged from my parents who disowned me for 25 years. And so as a person with that lived experience, I really just like carry in my bones and in my dailiness what it means to create belonging in the world and what it means to find belonging in a manner that, transcends the structures that society imagines to be the spaces. And that it is broader and deeper and richer than that, that we can all tap into that lineage and that connection and that love as LGBTQ plus people, and that it's there for us, which I think, in this era of hostility being very visible, that's such an important thing to remember. And, this is some kind of a well of that affirming, I hope, at least it is for me. I want to
Yeah.
say that we are really fortunate tonight because two of the elders in this book are here in the Zoom room.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so
Hi.
not to put y'all on the spot, Crystal Mason and Vivian Varela, but maybe Peter, you would be open to unmuting them and seeing if they had anything they wanted to say. But I want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Oh, what a joy.
Yeah, you are both amazing, and we're so grateful for you being here. And I'm going to actually read what Vivian wrote in the chat. In my evolution of self-understanding as queer and non-binary, it opened up my understanding of ancestry through queer lineage throughout cultures and thousands of years. The decolonization process I'm currently experiencing, I began to understand that since I am queer and queerness is in every culture, therefore my ancestry transcends and is part of every culture. So my queer ancestry is from every culture. Word. Thank you.
I don't know if Crystal to say anything.
Yeah, Crystal, please do activate your camera if you'd like.
Hi, Crystal. This is Crystal Mason, everybody.
Hi, Crystal.
Hey, y'all. I was actually listening and cooking and heard my name, and so here I am.
Put you on the spot, Crystal.
It's great. It's a pleasure and an honor, really, to be put on the spot. Really, and I've been reading the book myself, and it's so amazing. And I feel like I was in conversation with all of these wonderful people, some that I know, of course, and some that I don't know. But again, I think about this moment and I think about how great a book this is for this particular moment. And for me, I also feel a responsibility to live as large and loud as I can so that other genderqueer and trans people can see me. And know that you can grow old, you can be happy, you can be have troubles, but you have community, and that there is like this wonderful, wonderful community in this world that loves you, right? That loves us. And even when, I've never been a one who wanted like love from the mainstream community. It's not like I don't care what people think, don't get me wrong, but I've wanted to be loved by the people who see me and the communities who see me, and that's always been like the most important thing to me. I'm getting a phone call, so I'm gonna go off.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was beautiful. And I think
So Vivian, please do activate your video and your audio.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear
yes,
you,
Vivian. We can hear you.
Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Caro.
And this is Vivian Varela, everybody.
Thank you so much. I am happy to be here. Do I keep quiet and wait for questions?
So is there anything you would like to just say?
Well, yeah, as you were talking about ancestry, I what you read, that has come to me little by little that, okay, so I have read about the queer, the Mushe in Oaxaca, or the lineage of queer transgender in India, And I'm like, well, that's my ancestry also. Since we are in every culture, this is what colonization has, I think, done to interrupt the memory and our history, to cut it off, to close, just like they're trying to, pretend Obama was never president, or take away names from our national archives, which is ridiculous. But these are the things that people who are filled with hate do. So what I am addressing now is that we must and we can accept the fact that we are, as queers, we are in every culture. So I am not confined to being born of Mexican on both sides ancestry, third generation here in the United States. That's not only who I am. Somehow, because I'm queer, I am a part of every culture in the world. In the Amazon, wherever you find queers, there's my ancestry. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sort of a global familia of queerness.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, Vivian.
Thank you for that. I just want to add that Camila Sosa Villada, who's an Argentinian trans writer,
Huge
in
fan.
her, yeah, incredible. She has a story in her collection, I'm a Fool for Loving You, Soy una tonta por quererte, that is about the kind of fictionalized version of the first person, or there's like indigenous person that's recorded, that was gender expansive, that was killed by the Spanish. So she has like she kind of inhabits the consciousness of that person. And so it's just like really beautiful, and it make you think of some of the stuff that Vivian was saying. Anyway, thank you for that. Thank you so much, Caro, for sharing all of this. Thank you also, Crystal, for being here, Vivian, for being here. How wonderful to get to hear you both. We're gonna open it up for questions now. So if folks have some questions, I'll read them from the chat. I don't see any right now, but I'll let people, don't be shy. We'll wait a little bit.
While we're waiting for a question in the chat, I'll maybe comment on something that Crystal said, which is they were saying that, that reading the book, which was such a cool thing for me to hear, that reading the book, they felt like they were in conversation with all of these people, some of whom are people that they know personally and some of them not, that they were talking to each other and having a conversation. And that brought me joy to hear that they had that reading experience, because that was my hope in putting people's voices alongside of each other and sort of on a theme. Like just as an example in the chapter on transitions, people who are like, this is what medical or physical transition has meant for me. This is how I decided not to do this or that particular aspect of transition. This is what social transition means to me. This is how I reserve the right to transition all of my life in different ways, and it's for me, all of the different ways. Sometimes it's like they're riffing with each other. So for the interviews, people were not in the same room, right? These were individual one-on-one interviews, but it was really a gift for me to be able to put people alongside of each other that way, so that, taking and splicing out almost like collage work, like cutting little pieces out of a magazine and then putting them next to each other and having that juxtaposition, but with words from transcripts, so that it sounds like they're sort of riffing with each other, which in a cosmic sense they are, right?
Yeah, they're having this like Socratic circle on the side of some like parallel universe together. I really appreciated that, and I think like it just like moved. I feel like there's like a building of an idea and like a movement of something on the page, right? So you're just also kind of creating a little arc with whatever. So like stuff like transition and like medical transition. So there will be a little arc on it. Different ways to use certain words. So there was one we talked a little bit about this, about the word tranny and how it has changed, for instance, the use and the relationship to it with a lot of people in the community. And sometimes there were people
about it, and then like, so everybody who talked about the word tranny, I sort of put them together in a section and then went, okay, how can I arrange these so that they're, a conversation about it.
Yeah, exactly. So they feel like they are having all the conversation. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish each person, but I feel like that's also the point. It's like we're just like kind of in this sitting in like a big family circle, all of us at the table, just kind of like going off and like talking and talking and talking about certain things. And that's how it feels.
It's
Very
not
like
really
family.
a book. It's a big cosmic family circle of trans.
Yeah. Eating sancocho. That's what's happening.
Of trans gender queerness. I mean, I love that.
I love that. I don't see any questions, you guys. So I'll wait a little bit more. See if anybody has any other questions. I just want to add something that I had asked you before around trans masculinity. And, you know, it was like such a joy for me to see it there. I feel like I was like very much raised by like trans women, and I am just like very in it with the girls. And I feel like also part of that has been the like I have dug and learned very little also sometimes around like trans masculinity and like the ancestry. And I got asked this once about, you know, digging more because there seems to be like I guess like less visibility on the history of it. And so
Absolutely.
so there's a little bit less. So I feel I just wanted to maybe touch a little bit on that, on like the kind of balance of energies here, the importance for me around, you know, seeing like butch trans mask energy was such a joy. Um, and yeah, just, you know, because I do feel like there's like a little bit of a missing or like a little gap around trans mask ancestry.
Yeah. Yeah, there absolutely is. And so I did what I could to create a balance between, different cultural and racial backgrounds and different realities, different gender expressions. So trans feminine folks, trans masculine folks, trying to get a balance of that. Also that, that there were Black trans masculine folks and Latinx trans masculine folks and, indigenous trans feminine folks, and there would be a balance there, and also wanting to have a balance between one of the realities of our beautiful gender variant and trans communities is that there are also many different kinds of gender expressions. So there's people who identify as trans man or a trans woman, and then people who are in some sort of non-binary or gender fluid or gender queer or gender expansive or trans masculine or trans feminine space, and so wanting to make room for all of it, right? All of it is truly welcome, which is part of what is so powerful about the trans cultures that we have created and that are evolving around us. Because in the 90s, as many of the people in the book testify, and in the 80s, categories were more fixed. You were if you were trans, then were you a real trans person? What does that mean? Did you have these kinds of surgeries? There was there were different kinds of categories.
Butch femme, very, very delineated butch
Yeah,
femme.
and butch meant, these 12 things, and it had to look this way. And often, that could be a kind of white dominated conception where people might not see themselves mirrored. And so, yeah, so wanting to hold all of that. And so what that means is that, there's, about 10 trans masculine people in this book, or, genderqueer masculine folks, butch folks, two-spirit butch folks like Joan, who, are embodying all of these different ways of holding an AFAB, assigned female at birth, masculinity, whether as a man or whether, somewhere within the trans spectrum or within gender queerness. And it's just so absolutely beautiful to me to hear how kaleidoscopic and beautiful our culture's experiences are. And while this isn't specifically a trans masculine book, I know for me, so many of the trans masculine stories have just been so, nourishing. So I'm glad that it sounds like there were some sparks there for you too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything that you're saying just like really resonates. And again, like I love hearing every single story. I just have been so much with the girls for most of my life. It's just been part of my and a lot of my queer history is just like around trans women
Raised
and
you up,
like
right?
bags.
Trans women
And
took
that's just
you in.
part of my yeah, I mean, those are
Space
people
for
that
us.
raised me. And so it was
Yeah.
just like, I was like, wow. And I think that my whole point is also just like, there's so much to just like learn also through this. And like, I don't know, I was incredibly moved. And one of the last questions that I wanted to ask you was something just like, um, something that people can take from this and like do right now with things being so hard. So one of the things that maybe you took from this book and that we
Oh,
can like kind of bring into our day to day right now.
well, thank you so much for that question, because I'll actually say two things. One is sort of cosmic, and then the other is very pragmatic. So, um, just cosmically, like keep going. As Nelson says at the end of the book, there is space for all of us in this world. Claim that space for yourself and others, and keep going. And know that we are always in a constantly unfolding, you know, evolution of culture toward liberation, and that the dailiness of what we do and how we live, who we're kind to, what we read, what we say, do, write, how we express ourselves matters and really does, one cosita at a time, shape the future of culture. So I hope we can root in believing that, even when we feel powerless, because as these folks testify, we have so much power. And then the pragmatic thing I'll say is that we were talking about Bambi Salcedo, who is the founder and executive director of the incredible Trans Latina Coalition. And they did recently lose their funding. And they are also on the front lines of you know, supporting undocumented trans Latina immigrants. I mean, not everybody that they support is undocumented, but immigrant trans Latina women, and they're on the front lines of, you know, supporting communities that are being attacked by ICE raids. So they are having a fundraiser, the March for Humanity, in August, and it's in Los Angeles and Hollywood, but I am doing a solidarity walk. If you know Oakland, I'm walking around Lake Merritt on August 24th at 11 a.m. And so if you're local and you'd like to come, you are invited to come and walk around Lake Merritt with me and then tell your friends and raise money. But if not, if you should feel moved to either make a donation or spread the word, I am raising funds for the Trans Latina Coalition. You can think of every dollar as an act of love. And the link is in my bio on Instagram if you are interested.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Those are wonderful things to do. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for this book. I also know that the stories exist online as audio, correct?
Yes,
so
they
folks can
exist.
also listen to
Yes,
the audio of this online.
Insight, the oral history archive at Columbia University, houses them online, and they're accessible to the public.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you as always. Thank you so much, City Lights. Thank you so much, Peter, for having us. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Juli. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Such a pleasure. You are both superheroes in our eyes, and I really want to thank you both for gracing our virtual hall. So, Caro, congratulations on this important new book, which actually comes to us at a very kind of telling moment. And so it speaks to us very deeply. And Julián, appreciate you doing the honors. You're such a great interviewer, and we look forward to your new book too at some point. So looking forward to that. And thank you everyone in the audience for joining us. You've been a great audience. And today's event has been made possible by support from the City Lights Foundation, fostering an active engagement with books and literary culture through our public events, our publishing program, our educational outreach. And of course, it is all dedicated to sustaining a vibrant community of readers, writers, and independent thinkers. So long, everyone. Take care. Be kind to each other. We hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.